So let me just start the evening by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on where I am. I'm on the land of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation in the south east of Melbourne. And I pay my respects to elders past and present. And I also want to extend that respect to the elders of the lands across this great nation and pay respect to the elders past and present, and to hope that we will be successful in the campaign in the coming year to bring a voice to Parliament and to bring further steps towards justice. And that's something that we will be campaigning for in the coming year. I'm, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Melinda Jones. I am the National President of National Council of Jewish Women of Australia. This is our 11th webinar that we've had in 2022, which is quite exciting to know. We have had webinars on quite a wide range of subjects, and they have covered women in Iran, women in Ukraine, women on kinder transport, the situation of women during the Holocaust, looking at a gendered perspective on Kristallnacht. We've had sessions on Rosh Hashanah, on Pesach. We had a Haggadah meeting. We have meetings all around the year on political issues and on social issues and of issues of concern to Jewish women wherever they are in Australia, and of course also of interest to people in other parts of the world. And we often have visitors. So when I saw Suzanne here, I wasn't sure whether she was in Australia or in Israel, because she's sometimes in one rather than the other. So tonight we're very, very fortunate to have two great educators with us, and they are also people very much involved in peace. So our last few sessions have actually been about women caught up in war, and we want to end the year on a positive note to be talking about women caught up in fighting for peace. And you'll hear more about that as we go on. Tonight, we're the third night of Chanukah. We will light the candles when it gets to the end of the session for the third night of Chanukah. And we are going to go back to biblical times, and we're going to go back to look at some text with Peta and Roni. I'll introduce you to Peta now, and then when we hand over to Roni, I'll introduce you to her. Peta is a senior fellow at the Kiverstein Institute, which is a feminist institute working in Jerusalem to improve the position of women. Their work includes looking at building women representation in local councils and beyond, as well as working with other feminist groups on every topic that's relevant to women. And Peta is before she made Aliyah to Israel, she was very involved in Jewish education in Australia, both for adults and for children. And she is both my sister and one of my favorite educators. Over to you, Peta.
Oh, that's so nice, Lindy. Thank you so much. So I want to begin by saying that when we are looking at the influence of women in peacemaking, and we look at our ancient texts, it's actually very difficult. We have women biblical heroes like Deborah and Yael and even Queen Esther. And when you look at their contribution, they seem to be involved more in, unfortunately, taking on the male role of leading women in battle than they do as peacemakers. I've tried to maybe mold our foremothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, into models for peacemaking, but it's a bit of a stretch. We don't really have those role models in our biblical texts that put women as peacemaking. On the other hand, we do have Bruria, the woman, the only woman I see who's actually a halakhic authority in the Talmud. She's there as a halakhic authority. And Bruria's peacemaking is very clever. Bruria comes along and her husband, Rabbi Meir, famous rabbi, is very angry at the village louts, the hooligans who are driving him mad. And he goes around, he says, I want us to wipe these hooligans, the sinners, off the earth. And Bruria gently says to him, but the verse, you're reading the verse wrong. It's not to wipe out the sinners. It's to wipe out the sins. And by turning it around, she can be a model for us in saying, if we need to deal with people who are problematic, look at solving the problems. Don't look at attacking the perpetrators of the violence or the troubles. Go behind and look at the causes. You know, when I was growing up in Australia, in the dialogue between Jews and others on Israel, when they used the word root causes, it was a very negative connotation. The root cause was always Israel. The existence of Israel was the root cause of all the problems. So I'm cautious about using that word, but indeed that was Berea's message, to try and deal with the problems. What we are going to do tonight, though, is not so much look at women as peacemakers, but perhaps see an alternative vision of women in texts that are both Talmudic and Midrashic, that portray women in a light that perhaps is not so well known. So I'm going to start. I'm going to share my screen with you. Hopefully this will work. It worked a moment ago. Come on. Lost it. What happened? Are you seeing it? No. Here we go. Share. Let's see if I can do it. Yay. Okay. And we're going to start the slideshow from the women. We have decided to call our presentation, I Learned Sense from Women. And you'll hear this line at the end of Roni's presentation. And I've called it Hasmonean Women in Midrash. And you will see that Roni and I are both going to also, at the end of this, be raising awareness of women wage peace. And you'll see we're dressed in our white and turquoise for raising awareness of women wage peace. So I'm going to begin with one story, of which we have 3 versions. It's a story that's based on an idea that you will have heard about with regards to the Chanukah story, that the Hellenists told the Jewish nation, or the Judeans, that they could no longer practice their Judaism. And I'm sure you've all heard this, and this is why we had to rise up, rebel against the Hellenists. But I'm going to start with some for the Midrashic text, and this is based on a shiur by Rachel Edelman, who is one of my teachers. I learned with her in Matan. She's a great feminist teacher, and if you have an opportunity to learn with her, take it. She's currently in the States, but she's she might be back actually, but she was in the States, and she's a great teacher. So she starts by bringing us this from a Midrashic text, which is based on Megillat Tanit, a section of the Gemara, and it says, why is the 17th of Elul considered a joyous day? Nothing to do with today's date, because the Romans left Jerusalem. So what was so bad about the Romans, they ask? And by the way, the Romans you can take all the way back to the Hellenists, because they would put military encampments in the cities to rape the brides, who only afterwards could marry their husbands. But it then goes on, and it comes back, as I said, you have to talk about the Romans not just as Romans, but also the Hasmoneans, because it says, but Mattathias, you've heard of it, son of Yochanan the high priest, so we're in that Hasmonean dynasty, had a daughter, and when it came time for her to marry, an officer came to defile her, and they did not allow him. Instead, Mattathias and his sons were zealous and came out stronger than the Greek kingdom, who fell into the hands, and they, the Hasmoneans, killed the Greeks. So this first version of the story has the men responding to a threat on a very particular daughter. And unfortunately, according to this first version, it seems that many virgins had to be raped by the Romans before they were allowed to marry. But when it came to Mattathias, he wouldn't allow it for his own daughter. So in fact, the immediate cause of the Hasmonean revolt that we all talk about at Chanukah in this version is because Yochanan would not allow his daughter, Mattathias would not allow his daughter to be defiled. There's a second version, and notice that this a little bit later. And the second version of the same story has a little bit more detail. It says, it starts with this is so typical of the way Midrash is written, where you start from a verse, a pasuk, from something from the third part of the Tanakh, and this is from Psalms. Rabbi Yochanan said, these are the Greeks who made war with the Hasmonean house. So they started it. For at that time, when the Greeks went into the sanctuary defiling all the oil in the sanctuary, Yochanan the high priest had a daughter, Hannah was her name. So we've now been given her name, which we didn't in the earlier version. There was no one as beautiful as her in the world, and she was betrothed to Elazar, the son of the Hasmonean, whose father was a Magen, a warrior, or maybe it was a Segan. Notice that one letter different. Sometimes it's hard to know what the original was, but he was anointed for battle. So he was a, whatever it was, he was a fighter. And one of the Greeks came and seized her by her ponytail, spread out a Torah scroll, and tried to come upon her in the presence of Elazar, her betrothed. Now notice, we've got a lot more detail in this story than we had. And also it's an immediate incident to which the Hasmoneans are going to respond. So they begin to, so all the people around in the story, and I haven't quoted the entire text because we don't have time for it, but they began to pray. And they say, I lift up my eyes to the hills from where will come my help. You all know this, I'm sure. And in their praying, they start to argue, but they say, prayer, is this going to be good enough? And so there's an argument ensues. And then Yochanan, the high priest, said to him, yes, but what do you think we should do if praying isn't good enough? And he said to him, I and my 7 sons and you and your 3 sons, we're like the 12 tribes of Israel. We can trust that God will perform a miracle for us in the sake of his name. But when Elazar heard this, he was empowered. He said, if we're like the 12 tribes, we've got to do what they do. We've got to fight for the land and for our people. And he cut off the head of the Greek. And he says, that's where my assistance come from the Lord, the creator of heaven and earth, not by standing and praying, but by doing something. So that second one, we have a lot more detail. We have an immediate incident. But notice that in both those versions, the woman whom we now know is the beautiful Hannah. We've given her name in the second version. So she now she's passive, but we have a lot more information about her beauty. In the third version of the story, which was handed down orally, and we don't have a text of this version, we don't have a text of it from in any of our written sources, but we have a reference to it. In the 13th century, a Muslim scholar quotes it. So even though we don't have a written text of it, and we only can find a 1915 version, this was part of the oral tradition. And this, I think that you're going to have heard a lot of these things before. So this is the one that I'm going to spend a lot more time on. It says, they say that in the day of the Greeks, the scripture ensured that they would challenge the secret of Israel. And so they said, come, let us renew our decrees against them, that they will reject their God and believe in our idolatry. This is very close to what we see in the book of Maccabees, Maccabees 1, where it says that the Hellenists wanted to renew their decrees against them. But in this particular version, it's challenging the secret of Israel. So they won't believe in God anymore. They won't have their power from their God. They're going to come over and believe in our God. So they issued a decree. Now, this is dense writing, but I'm going to keep to my time and not read all of it. But you're familiar with it, with some of these things, but maybe not so familiar with the details here. So one of the decrees was that anyone in Israel who made a lock on their door would be impaled by the sword. Why? Because if you have a lock on your door, you can have privacy, you can have modesty, you can protect yourself. But so what did the Israelites do? They decided that they would get rid of all the doors, and they wouldn't have eat wouldn't eat or drink or have sex or use their beds on account of the robbers and the Greek mercenaries and the burglars, and they didn't sleep at all day or night, which was seen as the fulfillment of the curse in Kitavo, in the end of book of Deuteronomy, which says you shall be in fear day and night. But sorry, did somebody want to? No. So it says you will be in fear day and night is fulfillment of a biblical prophecy. So we are still holding our faith, and the Greeks saw that we were able to withstand the decree. Nobody died, nobody changed to the Greek religion, despite the fact that they weren't eating, drinking, having sex, that they weren't protecting themselves, because they saw it as the fulfillment of a defined decree. So what did they do? They decided, so they made another decree, a different decree. And the decree is any man in Israel that has an ox or a sheep will engrave on its horn that it has no share in the God of Israel. Why did they do this? So that the Jews wouldn't eat meat or drink milk or cheese, or they wouldn't be able to plow. But Israel said they're extremely upset. But what did they do? They sold all their animals. And so they were fulfilling another prophecy in book of Ecclesiastes. So the Greeks see what happens is we are actually strengthened by these decrees, according to this Midrash. And then they decided that this hasn't worked. So what they're going to do is they say anyone whose wife goes to the mikveh will be impaled with a sword, and children will be sold as slaves. Now, this is, of course, you have to understand the centrality of mikveh to Jewish life. So they weren't going to have sexual relations. We already saw that with the doors, by the way. But it seems that in this Midrash, the idea is that each one of the new decrees replaces the previous one. Otherwise, we'd all be starved and dead by now. But in this one, it says that so we refrain from sexual relations. So we've obviously got doors back, but we can't have sex because we can't, the women won't go to the mikveh. And so if they decided that they couldn't have sex, then the Greeks said, well, since the Israelites are not using their beds, we should take the women. This takes us to the beginning of the previous two versions that we read of Midrash. We're going to take the women. We're going to use the women. So when the Israelites saw this, they went back to their wives without immersion against the women's will. Now look at what's going to happen then. So the women prayed, and the women said, Master of the universe, this is without our consent and not for our well-being. For a woman does not want to lie under her husband, not in accord with the due time or pleasure, not in accordance with the laws. So God said to them, because you did this unintentionally, I will purify you. And God opened for each one of them a spring inside the home, and the women would immerse within the house in fulfillment of the scripture. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. And another verse, the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion. If we had more time, I would spend a little time on these verses, but also on the methodology that's being used here in the way the Midrash is built, so that each one of the happenings, each of the events, each stage is actually fulfillment of a biblical verse. But in this case, note, the women are the ones who complain, and the women are the ones who bring the change. God answers their prayers, which I think is just a really powerful insertion into the story, which of course we didn't see in any of the previous two versions. But then the Greeks saw that the Israelites were not feeling the burden of their decree. So they issued a bitter and foul decree that no bride would enter the wedding canopy on the night of her wedding without first having gone to the governor of that place. Again, the return to the original Midrash that I showed you. So when the Israelites heard, they wrung their hands and lost their strength and refrained from marrying. Until now, they've been able to withstand because they saw the fulfillment of the verses, and now they see the fulfillment of a different verse that is beyond them. The daughters of Israel would mature and get old as virgins, fulfilling the verse, her virgins grieve, and she is bitter. And the Greeks would sexually abuse the daughters of Israel, and this went on for 3 years and 8 months, until the act of one daughter of the high priest who was engaged to a Hasmonean son. Elazar was his name. Exactly the same detail as in the previous version, but it comes at the end of a long process here. On the day of the celebration, they sat her on a palanquin, on a litter of some sort. And when the time for the feast came, all the elders of Israel gathered in honor of Mattatyahu, the high priest, and the son of the Hasmonean, for there were none in that generation as great as them. But what's going to happen here? The threat is there that she's going to have to sleep first with the governor of the place before she can go and be married to her husband. So when they sat down to eat, Hannah, so her name comes back, the same name, the daughter of Mattatyahu, stood atop the palanquin and raised her arms and ripped her garment and stood before all of Israel exposed and before her father and mother and her father-in-law. She takes the action. And it's, wow, is it bold action? And when her brothers saw this, they were ashamed and they bent their heads to the ground and tore their clothing, and they were ready to kill her. And she said to them, listen, my brothers and my uncles, now that I have stood before you righteous ones, naked, with no sin upon me. And look again at the play, you know, naked is of course a sin, but naked is also, I'm exposed, you have to judge me now. And you see, I haven't done anything wrong. And he says, you've got zeal against me, but you were not so zealous on my behalf when you were prepared to let me be first deflowered by the Roman, Greek, Hellenist, the words are used interchangeably, governor, so he could abuse me. You should learn from Shimon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah in Genesis 34, which we just read a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure we should be so proud of that story, but she says at least those brothers were zealous for their sister and killed the city of Shem and risked their lives for the integrity of God, and God came to their assistance and did not destroy them. You're 5 brothers and over 200 young priests. Place your trust in God and God will assist you. Now look, she's making this long speech quoting biblical verses, and in the Midrash she stands up naked and calls them to stop this terrible thing that's going on. And she opened her mouth crying and said, Lord of the universe, if you will not do this for our sake, do it for the holiness of your great name that is upon us, and we will rise up in our vengeance. So she sees the women as part of the uprising. And that moment, the brothers were seized with zeal on her behalf, and they said, let us go and get advice what to do. And they consulted one another, and it seems that Hannah's part of it, because she says, let us take our sister, we'll go to the great king, we'll tell him our sister is the daughter of a high priest, there's no one in Israel greater, so it's not fitting she should lie with a mere governor. She should go with the king, and she is going to be the Trojan horse, if you like, to get her into the palace. We'll kill him and we'll leave, and we'll start with his servants and relatives. Then God will help and exalt us. And God indeed made a great salvation for them. And they heard a divine voice come out of the Holy of Holies saying, all Israel, the young priests, by the way, noticing the word Talia, the lamb, it can be a female word. And notice that the divine verse is the but called the female presence of God. We've been victorious against Antiochus. And what I see, I'm supposed to stop share. Oh dear. How do I stop share?
You have, Peter. You've stopped share.
Oh, good. Excellent. That's what I intended to do. As you see in the story, we have a development of the story from a powerless woman who isn't even named to an equally powerless woman, but we know something about her and she is named, to the woman actually taking the lead in the story. Same Midrash, 3 versions, each one a little bit different. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's great that women stand up and say, let's go to war, but I am suggesting that this is a model of seeing the woman's voice and the empowerment of women, and that it wasn't always that the woman was just the victim or the passive bystander and things happened around her. There are midrashim, which are very old, in which the woman's voice is heard. So that's what I wanted to share with you about Hasmonean woman. And in that last version, of course, it is the daughter who actually starts the battle that is the Chanukah battle that we're celebrating now on Chanukah. So that's my contribution of our thinking today. And then Roni. And I'll share your screen whenever you're ready.
Peter, before I hand you over to Roni, I'm just wondering if anyone has any question or point of clarification or anything they'd like to ask for a small group, and there's no reason why we can't indulge ourselves in that. Has anyone got anything they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I do.
Go for it.
Do you think that the only way she was going to grab their attention was by ripping her clothes off? Is it kind of something time-honored ritual that women have to do to get men's attention? Really, and you think about car advertisements where they'll drape a bikini-clad woman on the bonnet, and from there 20 million other uses of the naked female form. And it kind of almost seems to me that unless she did that, they weren't going to listen or pay attention, because they're probably all eating and drinking and doing whatever they were doing.
Yeah, it's a good point. Look, I think in the story, of course, we don't know to what extent to take any of these stories literally, but the concept, I think that there's a lovely play on words as I'm standing before you naked. Naked can also mean innocent. Naked can also mean open to your judgment. And the other thing was she was going to be defiled sexually. And there's a strong, if you like, feminist point to be made here, that I can choose when I expose my body, but my body is not for sale to others. And that I think can be as a feminist motif, if you like, that it's her choice when she exposes her body.
I agree. No, I love that. I think it's really important for women to have control over their own bodies and their own sexuality. And I really do love that analogy. Thanks, Peter.
Well, I mean, whether that's choice or not, that's also questionable. Yeah,
she was doing something very, very dramatic here to stop what would have been something very terrible. But what's interesting is that it said it had gone on for 3 years and 8 months. So, you know, many, many women had been subjected to that humiliation, according to this Midrashic text. By the way, I don't know that we have, it's interesting. We don't necessarily have historical evidence of how many, of whether this particular decree was enacted or whether, but we do know that rape is such a pervasive weapon of war. And so the fact that it's put into these ancient Midrashim rings true, whether it was exactly as we describe it here, but it rings true that if you want to subdue a population, using rape was and is common. There was a Russian defector speaking on Israeli television a couple of nights ago, just bearing testimony to the way that Russian soldiers are using rape in the Ukraine right now, as a form of subduing the population. So, but what is worse for me is, but thinking about this whole Chanukah story, is that it takes till Rachel, to this particular daughter, for the Israeli men not to have, I don't know, should we have risen up earlier if this is literal? It's
yes. Should one rape have been allowed if the men were really honourable? You know, at what point is it?
Yeah, it does say. Remember, it does say that for a while they actually stopped marrying.
Yes,
as fulfillment of the prophecy, but obviously that's not sustainable either. So.
Thank you very much, Peter. This is a great introduction or first half of our proceedings this evening. I'll move on to Roni Yavin. Roni, who is so welcome here, as a first-time visitor to the International Council of Jewish Women of Australia. And Roni is an educator. She's the former director of a Beit Mideash Elul and formerly on the board of management of Jerusalem High School, which is, you know, quite an achievement for a woman. She's had quite a lot of other amazing things. You know, one of the most important, of course, is that she's the mother of 3 children. My children don't get mentioned often enough, so I have to mention other people's children. What could we do without them? But what would we be in our lives? Anyway, but children aside, what Roni's doing now, which is very brave, I think, is doing her doctorate. And she is doing a doctorate in Talmud at Ben Gurion University, and she's going to share
Thank
with us
you.
some of her learning. Thank you so much, Roni.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you all over there. I just wanted maybe to go back to Peta's one point that Rachel was asking about being naked, because the story that I want to bring up is completely different. It's about the wisdom of women, of course, but it's a different thing. Just to make a point that, yes, getting naked, I have another story from the Talmud about a mother, by the way, taking care of her boy, her son, and they didn't listen to her. And he was in a very dangerous situation. So eventually, when she wanted all these big rabbis to listen to her, she just ripped she took her clothes off and stand in front of them in the middle of the Beit Midrash. And she said, "You listen to me now." And this is the only way that she made them listen to her. So she managed to do a change by that. And I was checking it, and it's interesting enough that it was also something that I could find in Greek, in ancient Greek also. Not so many times, but sometimes when women got to a point that they couldn't make nobody is listening. So that's very interesting point. It's a good point. So
I'm going to try and share the screen now, Roni. I'll try and share the screen, and you tell me if I'm succeeding.
Please do.
Tell me if I'm succeeding.
The story that I wrote, and I'll at the meantime would say that the story that I again.
Just a minute. I haven't succeeded. No, sorry, I haven't succeeded. I'll try again. It was funny the first time I did it too, but now I seem to have lost it altogether. Window. See if I can do that. Is that it? Are you seeing it?
No.
You're still not seeing it. How do I do this? Share. No.
Share screen.
No. Yeah, I know. I know the principle. I do know the principle. Okay. Here we go. Share. There we go. We're right.
Okay, great. Yes.
Yes.
So I'll read it slowly. It's only one story. It's not that complicated, but it's interesting. And let's see maybe I'll go back to what Peter said at the very beginning, that we have to look behind. We have to understand what are the women role here. So when Alexander was preparing to part from the elders of the Negev, he said to them, "I want to go to wage war against country of Africa. What do you recommend?" They said to him, "You will be unable to go there, as the mountains of darkness block the passes." He said to them like a king. Yes, king wouldn't take a no for an answer. So he said to them, "It is not possible for me not to go. And it is due to this reason that I ask you to advise me, rather than refraining from my campaign. What might I do to cross the mountains of darkness?" So they said to him, "Bring Libyan donkeys that walk even in the darkness, and these animals will guide you through those passes. And bring coils of rope and tie one end of the rope on this near side of the mountain as you are about to enter there. So that when you come to return by the same path, you may take hold of the rope left from your initial march, and following them, you will come back to your place." So here is Alexander the Great preparing himself to a war around behind the mountain. Alexander, I'm going back to the text. Alexander did this and went on his campaign. He came to a certain town whose entire population was women, and he wanted to wage battle against them. So now listen carefully. The women said to him, "It is not your interest to fight us. If you will kill us, people will say Alexander kills women. And if we will kill you, people will say Alexander is the king whom women killed in battle." So he thought about it. And then we will go back to that later. And then instead of fighting them, Alexander said to them, "Bring me bread." Bread, lechem, is a sign of peace. It's a signal of peace. It's a hint of peace. So he said, "Okay, I listen to you. Bring me bread." And then they brought him bread of gold up on a table of gold. So it's not a bread, it's a gold. It's just a gold, and then a table of gold and more stuff made out of gold and jewelry. Alexander said to the women, "Do people eat bread of gold? What's happening here?" Oh, there. So they said to him, "But," listen to this, "if all you wanted was actual bread, didn't you have bread to eat in your own place? It was not for bread that you took up a campaign and toiled and came here." I mean, you didn't do all this long way just for bread, of course. "You must have come to increase your wealth." So when Alexander left and came back to his land, he wrote upon the gate of the town, "I, Alexander of Macedon, was a fool until I came to the country of Africa of women, and I learned sense from women." Okay? So that's the story. So, I mean, you can understand, I mean, you can say, if you want to say something that's okay with me, you can say whatever you think, but let me just put out maybe one or a few points. First, what they're saying to him. They understood that this is going to be a war, the women of this city. Obviously, they understood that this is going to be a war. And even if it will be successful for them, war is never successful. So they obviously said something very simple. It is not your interest to fight us. It's not an interest to have a war. And now they need to persuade him. They need to say something that, okay, what is interest? I came all this way because I want to fight you or to fight. So they are looking to the essence. They are looking what he was looking for in the beginning, to begin with. So they are looking for, first of all, they said they are not ashamed to say, "Oh, if you will kill us, everybody would laugh at you. Killing women, it's not a big deal. So you won't be a big hero by that. And if it happens that we will be able to kill you and to win in the war, then it will be a shame on you. You have been killed by women. So that's obviously not good. So anyway, if you will have a war with us, in any case, it won't be good for you, even if you will win. So it won't be good for you." So they managed to talk to him, but they didn't want, and he said, "Okay." I mean, we can understand that he said, "Okay, so instead of fighting, let's have a meal." But they are smarter than that. They said, "Okay, he had a reason to come, and we don't want just to bring a meal like it will be very natural for us." So he was asking for bread. He was asking for bread, meaning he was asking for peace. So let's be smart and honor him for that. We don't want to humiliate him. We want him as a partner. Although he maybe look stupid because he came all this way and eventually is not going to have his war. So let's help him get out of it. We managed to achieve what we wanted. but we wanted him to achieve what he wanted. So let's give him a bread. And they did it in a very smart way. They gave him gold, and they gave him a table of gold. This is a sense, it's a way of saying, let's be generous, not just bread, not just one piece of gold. Let's give him a lot of gold, so he will be happy. Nobody killed, nobody, but he got what he wanted. We got what we wanted. No war. So that's why when he's coming back to his home, he would say, they teach me something. I learned something. I learned wisdom from these women. I don't need a war if I want to get money. I don't need a war if I want to get prosperity, or I want to get more land. See, this is the women, the voice of the women here was smart. They can kind of humiliate themselves, or they can give up of being, they just need to use their head and to squeeze their ego and said, okay, we will give you, you will be happy at the end without having a war. We will give you the money or the richness that you were looking for. So eventually at the end of the story, he's going back and saying, I managed to get what I really wanted in the beginning without killing. So that's that's the story, and that's the end of it. So I will be very happy to hear your comments and questions about it. I need to say, maybe like Peta did, there is a 3 version of this story, but the story is the same. The version are maybe just the names of the city, Carthago or Africa, or I mean, but it's the story is the same. So I'll be happy to hear comments or questions. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Roni. You saw lots of people were giving you claps on Zoom, although Zoom doesn't work so well for that. But so what you've said has been very much appreciated. So would anyone like to comment?
Yeah, you know me,
yes.
I'll always be first.
Okay.
It's a shame that the Ukrainians didn't learn from that story, and if they just gave the Russians money, gold, they could have saved the war in Ukraine. And I'm being facetious, but it's obviously not just them, it's every single war in history, when you consider that the objective of all wars has been for power, for wealth, for additional land and prosperity. And the purpose of all wars has always been the same, at always the cost of massive losses of everyone, particularly the men, but women and children, everyone suffers. And why didn't everyone learn from that story and just pay the oppressor to leave them alone?
But you know, the problem is sometimes maybe it's the same of Ukraine, but I think it was a story of the Second World War, that it was not only about money. When it's about, I mean, there is a Midrash about what is the reason to fight for, what is, so it's money, it's proud, and it's power. So sometimes it's also about being not proud, how do you say?
Pride.
Gava.
Pride.
Pride. So sometimes it's about,
or maybe
also
honor.
Honor.
Mm.
Yeah. So you need to give them their space, not necessarily money, but not just the money, because sometimes money is just make them more hungry. So they need more and more and more and more money.
Yeah,
so
I think the message. That I thought the message was really that the women were actually able to stop and think about what are that dreadful word Peter mentioned at the beginning, the root causes, what actually is underlying, and as you said, Roni, that may be money, but it may not be money. It may be that they want to destroy the population across the river because they're eating too much food. And there isn't enough food, and if there might be some other way of getting food in, they wouldn't feel the need to destroy that other population. You know, there's all sorts of possibilities. Elisa, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to take it back to the question of rape in war, which was mentioned at the beginning. You know, what are the reasons behind this? And if we bring it back to that and cross over the story. Full stop, question mark.
Well, I heard, what I already heard was that Rwanda and Somalia, all the countries there in Africa, those races or nations use rape as a tool of war, because once a woman has been raped, her own husband doesn't want to touch her anymore. And therefore, she now becomes the possession of the whatever the new race is that's now victorious in that region, and that way they propagate more of their own children, their own seed, and that probably
Rachel, that's a very I think that's a very simplification to narrow it to a particular culture. In the former Yugoslavia, rape was used as a tool of war. This is in Europe, terribly. Throughout history, in both the First and the Second World War, rape was used as a tool of war. I don't think it's.
but it's the same reason, no doubt.
No, unfortunately, no? I think that the women as the property, the victim, women. I mean, I'm doing daf yomi for my sins, and you know, women seen as the property, as possessions that can be bartered, that can be used. This is cross-cultural. Unfortunately, it's been historically that, you know, it's not restricted to. It's not, yeah. So it's not restricted to a particular view of propagating a race in a particular way. No. It's much
not
broader
just about war. It's used elections and all of that. A few years back, when there was an international conference having to do with this topic, and rape is generally a power control coming out of that, rather than some considered, thought out, this is how we're going to wipe out this group of people and repropagate or something like that. That may be a consequence somewhere and could be, but that's not the thinking behind it. We saw that, as Peter said, it goes back thousands of years in every war, but it's also every election in big parts of the world, sadly, and down to the local level whenever it happens. So, you know, it has to do with these stories inspire me, because it's about women taking their own power and using it and demonstrating the wisdom of women.
And I want to just one point, sorry, just to say that if we will go back to the beginning of the story that I wrote, it's a city of women. It's not something very common, and they had a reason to have a city of women. It's very rare, but that was an historic fact, not just a dreaming. There was very few like that, but there was a city of women that they were fighters. So that was the basic.
And there's actually still to this day a couple places in more recent times in some parts of the world that have been like that as well. But I think it's very inspiring for us to not only examine the wisdom or just that women don't have to see themselves as victims or even as survivors, but being proactive to take power, not just on behalf of themselves as individual, but in these cases, it's about the whole population, the whole nation.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Roni, about, you know, the story you're telling about meeting, you know, coming across this town of women, of just all these women, you know, is it that he, you know, that there could have also been that fear that the women could have been used for rape for the men, you know, and instilling that fear, you know, that it could also be, you know, how these stories of war kind of spread, and it could be a way of, had he been successful, could have been instilled into other parts of the world, that, you know, he'd come across these places of just women and he was, you know, managed to conquer and rape them and you know, because obviously it's a way of subduing women, causing fear, taking their power. You know, could that possibly be an agenda as well?
I'm not sure I understand what the question is. What are you saying? That you think it's their agenda, or maybe it's behind the story, the agenda behind the story?
Could it possibly be an agenda behind the story? Like, considering that a lot of times with war, there is those stories of rape within, well, most to all wars, you know, which takes away power, which instills fear. You know, could that have been an agenda behind the story?
I don't know. It's a good question. I really don't know. I can only tell you maybe the background a little bit more. First of all, it's in the Talmud, which is even less than what Peta brought. There is no women in the Talmud or in the Mishnah. Very, very, very few. So when I'm trying, and this is what I'm trying to look, if there is women there, why and what is the hidden agenda there? I don't know. It's really hard for me to say, but I can only say that this story, I mean, Alexander the Great, there is a story about, it's part of a big story about Alexander the Great, that he is asked 10 questions and he is answering, and he respects wisdom. I mean, the name that the Talmud is giving him, but also in history, that he respects wisdom. And he, of course, he wanted power and he wanted money, but he respects wisdom and he respects different cultures. So there is 10 questions that they are asking him, and he is giving answers, different kinds of questions, and all about the wisdom of people. So the last one was concerning to this wall. So it's part of, if the whole picture is a part of yes, giving, how do you say, a deeper look in reality. So I don't know about specific story, if there is maybe a hidden agenda behind what I saw so far, but I know it's part of him. It's his personality, the way, of course, that he had been described also by Jews, but also not only by Jews. And I don't know if you're familiar with the history of him. Yeah, he was a big conqueror and he was a big fighter, but in a funny way, it's kind of funny, but it's goes both ways. He was not, how should I say that? He was not just killing everybody. If somebody said, okay, I'll give you the money, like, let's go to the story. We'll give you the money. So he said, okay, I'll give you the ability to live your own life. I'm not going to give you freedom, but I'm going to give you, I will respect your culture. I will respect your life. Okay, so.
There's a beautiful irony in the story you bring, Roni. Beautiful irony when the women say, and if we manage to kill you, well, then you'll say, well, he was defeated by women. And I think that we can read that today with great irony, the underestimation of the abilities of women. So.
And also, as we know, we talk about in Women Wage Peace a lot, there is a lot of research that would say and will prove that when women come to negotiate table, they are willing to give up their ego because they see the purpose ahead of them. Sometimes men, not sometimes, many times, men see that strategic way of thinking as a weakness. But no, it's not out of weakness. It's out of seeing the purpose and happy to get to the purpose. And on the way to the purpose, we are willing to give up gold, or we are willing to give up land, or we are willing to give up, I don't know, even our beautiful name, whatever. But we think that war is the worst scenario. So let's see what we can do on the way not to get there. So I think this is women's way of thinking. And so many research had been proven that yes, women would think about the goal much before or even more than they would think about their ego. So that's what happened here. Yeah, okay, they would say you've been killed by women. Can you imagine? I mean,
Yeah.
Now, I think you can see that it's getting dark at my end. You see my room is gradually getting darker and darker, and that's because I don't have the light on, and I'm partly waiting to see when it's dark enough for us to light Chanukah candles. But before we do, I actually have something to say that Peter was going to say, but I'm going to say something. We were hoping tonight to do something quite unusual. National Council of Jewish Women at a national level doesn't raise funds as a general rule for anything, but we have entered into an agreement with Women Wage Peace that we will help Women Wage Peace raise funds for a peace movement in Israel involving women. We think it's the best Zionist project we can possibly be involved in, and the most appropriate Zionist project that we can be involved in. We always have to have a project that's concerned with Israel. It wouldn't be right to not have such a project. So we have talked, and we started earlier in the year with beginning with an agreement about the sort of money that we'd raise, which we haven't been able to do, partly because we never directly ask people for money. And today we are, Danielle has put in the chat the link that if you'd like to donate some money directly to Women Wage Peace, that would be fantastic. The other thing I want to ask though is, because you're such a small dedicated group of people, you might be interested in helping me in these causes. So I'm really serious. I need more people to work in various aspects of the organization. If you are interested and think that you've got any capacity to help negotiate some ways we can raise money for Women Wage Peace, please let me know, because we really need to find some ways. We've got some ideas into the new year, but it would be really good if we had some people who were enthusiastic about that, all around the country, of course. And the other thing is that I want to mention is we've got a conference coming up in July next year. It's the 100th anniversary of National Council. And I would also like input from people into what sorts of things they would like to see at the conference. What things would make you want to come to the conference? You're our core, so please tell me. You can get me at president@ncjwa.org.au. That's the easiest one to remember, rather than my personal email, but I'm Melinda Jones and I'm very easy to find around. So Peter, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just say this, that we had committed if we could, and of course the commitment is only to the extent that you can do it. It isn't, I'm studying Daf Yomi, and Daf Yomi is currently on Nedarim, on vows. And you know, you make a vow, it's very, very serious. We didn't make a vow, but we made a pledge to try to raise a certain amount, and within the next 11 days during 2022. And we've still got a long way to go. So if all of you who are here can take the link and just share it with other people, that would be helpful. Say to them, look, Women Wage Peace, the wisdom of Women Wage Peace is about what we've done this evening. That is sharing the wisdom of women to bring, so that the wisdom of women comes to bear on the situation here. Because unfortunately, until now, the wisdom of women has not been given a place in the peacemaking. And we don't have much peacemaking. We need a lot more. And if we could bring the wisdom of women to the table, we probably could make a difference. And we need your help. That the money is going to things like bringing women from across the country together, which we need to do, and support our Palestinian sisters and our Israeli Arab sisters as well, because we work in coordination with Women of the Sun, our sister Palestinian organization. We need money to bring the groups together, the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's not wasted on trivial things. We don't rent big offices or I don't know. We don't. It's about the real hardcore work that we need to do. And we do need support. So if you can support us in any way, just even share, as I say, sharing the link with friends who might just give a very small amount, but that small amount can make a difference. If we could have a chain and everybody in the chain just gave $10, would make a difference, make a huge difference. So I'm asking you to help there in the next 11 days if you can, and then we'll look again for next year. Roni, did you want to add something?
No, it's just, I'm happy with what you said, with all you said, and just said that we are all volunteers. It's an organization who are based on volunteers, and the money used only for the activity, and no, as you said, no offices, no jobs, just volunteers and the activity.
Yeah. And during the course of the coming year, I mean, we'll try and do this now, but we will bring you some other things that are where the collaboration is obvious. Peter and Roni are both wearing the colors of Women Wage Peace, and we've tried to get the Chanukah candles to be the right color. They're not quite the right blue, but we are going to light those candles now. You don't really want to hear my voice. I've got a terrible voice, but so everybody should unmute themselves. I'm going to go into the other room and where the Chanukah is, and we'll light the Chanukah and we'll sing the brachot together. If everyone unmutes, they can sing along. And
then I'll share a YouTube of Matzor that we can all sing along to together. So we have someone's beautiful voice, but we can all be hearing our own voice without everybody else having to hear it.
Okay.
I'll light the shamash while Melinda's coming. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik nesher Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ya'asa nisim la'avoteinu b'yamim ha'em b'zman hazeh.
Ma'osor Yeshuati Chana'el Leshabeach Tikun Beit Tefilati Shem Todah Nezabeach Le'et Achimat Be'ach Yitzhak HaMenabeach Azekmor Beshir Mizmor Chanukat HaMizbeach Azekmor Beshir Mizmor Chanukat HaMizbeach.
Thank you very much. Behind the scenes, we have Danielle, who's our Zoom master, as always, and she's fantastic. So thank you so much, Danielle, for keeping us all together. And once again, thank you, Roni. It's been lovely to meet you and to learn from you, lessons that we'll take to heart. And the same, of course, is true with Peter. Thank you, Peter, yet again, for a wonderful shiur.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you and Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks.
Chag Sameach. Bye.
Bye.